Hi guys, it is Gracie from Small Worlds Big Adventures, and today I am going to be walking you through a very common DIY I do for our Dungeons and Dragons game, and that is making cards for the table. This is something we do a lot. It will either because we have some sort of puzzle that requires cards, or we have like a deck that needs built. Right now in our current campaign, when a player dies, they get to draw a card and it can affect the rest of the parties. So things like that. Now, I am currently in Canva, and you can build out the design of your cards wherever makes sense for you. You could do it in a Google Doc, you could do it in like Microsoft Publisher. If you have it, you could do it in like InDesign, really whatever you have available. Canva is free. They do have like a paid version, but they have a lot of elements you can use within Canva, so while I don't always use it, that is what I'm using today. Right now, what you see me doing is actually sizing out what I want the cards to look like. I always have a border around my cards. It helps with lining stuff up, and then also like knowing how to cut and make sure it's straight in the future. And once I have my shape, I space it out to just kind of get a feel for how big they're going to be. Once I have the general card shape, then I start adding the images on it. I mostly start with the background first. I think it's a lot of fun, and it can also help me figure out the text and whatnot that I'll have on the other side. These cards are getting used in our current campaign. These are the cards that people draw when they die. So I want it to be a little creepy and a little ominous. So I'm playing around with some smoke things here, and I like to play around with a couple options. So next I'm going for like a splattered paint type of look. And you can see in Canva, you can resize it so that it fits the shape, and you can either shrink it down or you could just crop it. And it's pretty simple to do that. As my third background option, I wanted to see what more of a cloud-like would look. So I'm just exploring some of the cloud elements. As you can see here, this one's horizontal and I need it to be vertical, so I just rotate it and resize it down. I didn't want this bluish color, so I do end up recoloring it. And to do that, I just edited the image and then went with a neutral grayscale. But you can see there are quite a few options there. At this point, I pretty much knew I didn't like that first smoke one, so I did go ahead and delete it. But now I'm going to play around with the different images and text to put on top of this background. As I mentioned, these are the death cards, and so I am going to play around with the name of the deck a little bit, choosing different fonts, and then pairing it with an image or two. At this point, I was playing around with the title, and I settled on Die Again Another Day, because in this campaign we chronically are dying. It's a very Groundhog style day campaign. And once I had the skull in there in the text, I knew that's pretty much what I liked, so I didn't even attempt to do anything with the cloud one either. Once you have your final one that you know you like the background of, then you just duplicate it across the sheet until the whole sheet is filled. And then you have the back of your cards done. So once we have the backs of the cards done, it's time to work on the actual content of the cards. Most of the time you'll have several different options of like text on cards. Maybe each card is different. Maybe each card, or maybe there's like 10 of one card and 4 of another. But you'll figure out what you need. And then similar as to before, you'll create the boxes. Here I'm just reusing I copy pasted one of the clouds. I had decided why I wasn't going to use that for the background. I am going to use it for the text of the cards so that there's a little bit of character with it. And often I have all of the content for the cards in either a Google Doc or a text from my DM, and then I just copy paste the words over. I feel like font can go a long ways to creating the mood of the cards, so a lot of times I will try a bunch of different types of font. And here you can see Canva has tons of fonts you can choose from, both for free and paid. But I feel like this like papyrus one I end up on is like one of my favorites. I do end up using it a lot, especially if there's supposed to be like a fantasy feel to it. In Canva, the font I ended up landing on was Black Adder, kind of an angular-y little font that almost, it feels piratey in my opinion. So yeah, that's what I went for these cards. Once you have all the content in there, you can start futzing with things. In my experience, some cards have a little text while some have a lot of text. So you may be playing around with what font makes sense or where the text boxes lay. Is everything centered in the center of the card, both vertically and horizontally? Just horizontally, left align, all of those conversations. So once you get it to a place where you think it looks good, then you can save and print the document. Now, if you don't have a printer at home or a printer at work you can sneak printings of, there's a few ways that you can get your stuff printed for relatively cheap. You could send it to either your local UPS store or some other mailing store like that, and they'll often print for reasonably cheap. Though if you have full color, that is more expensive, but also your local library. A lot of times they will do it for 10-ish cents a sheet, which is very, very reasonable. Of course, beyond your library or your local mailing shop, there's tons of like web companies that will print stuff for you. They'll more likely be more expensive, especially since they have to mail you the final product. But yeah, so once they're printed, the next part is assembling them. Now, I was awful and I did not get video of me assembling them. But essentially what you do is you cut the cards apart, both the backs and the fronts of them, and then you glue them together with, I use Elmer's glue. You could also try like an adhesive spray. And when I say Elmer's glue, like a glue stick, not like wet one. Wet glue tends to make the paper warp, which doesn't look as good. I'm sure you could also just pin it together with like a little bit of tacky strips, because at least for me, the final part of this is laminating them so that they have some longevity and it just like feels nicer. What you see in front of me is my laminator. I got it from Walmart for like 25 bucks. It can do both 3mm and 5mm laminating, and it's pretty simple. You get the sheets. The sheets open almost like a book, and then you slide whatever you want to laminate in, and then you pass it through the laminator. The difference between 3mm and 5mm is thickness and sturdiness. The 5mm is going to be a little harder to bend, a little thicker, a little more substantive. But honestly, the 3mm is going to be way better than not laminated at all. And I really feel like by laminating the cards, it just like levels up the overall DIY for the table. It makes it seem a little extra special. And just like adding paint to your miniatures, it just makes the table come a little more alive. But once you have passed the sheets through the laminator, then you want to cut them apart. Now, since I used 2 sheets of paper, I try to give a little bit of an edge away from it. And the reason for this is because there will be the slightest air bubble that's closest to the edge. And in the grand scheme of tabletop play, this is not the end all be all. But if these cards are going to get a lot of use and whatnot, that's where the lamination may come apart, and then the 2 pieces might like peel. So just keep that in mind. If you just have 1 sheet of paper in there, you can pretty much cut on the paper. It's not going to be an issue. And some of you may be wondering, like, why didn't I print these front to back? I am just not skilled enough with laying out my sheets in Canva or Microsoft Publisher that when I print them, they perfectly line up. And so I've just found, rather than futzing with the technology, I am just happier to cut and glue them together the way I want them to be. So it's pretty simple. This whole process from beginning to end probably took me an hour, about 30 minutes to design the cards, and then another 30 minutes to like print, cut, and laminate. We'll add another, we'll say 90 minutes for the whole project. I'm really bad about underestimating how long things take. So we'll say 90 minutes front to end. But that can change a lot from how many cards you need, how big the cards are, if you hit any issues along the way. So now you can see we have our little deck, and I think they look really sharp. With the lamination, they're always going to have kind of a glossy feel to them. Here I'm going to do some tests like card stuff. You can see it doesn't just like, you can't just shuffle it quite like a normal deck, but they do, you are able to slide the cards in and out with ease. The cards are going to be less resistant to bending. If somebody spills something on the table or is eating with Cheeto fingers, like, the cards are going to outlive those. So this is one of the DIYs we do a lot, honestly, in our campaigns, is making cards for the table. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions, just let me know. Well, I hope this tutorial was helpful for you. I always have a lot of fun making these cards. If you've ever made cards for your D&D campaigns, let me know about it. What types of cards do you guys make? If you found this helpful, drop a like and subscribe. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time.